You've done it 1,000 times, probably more. You type a web address into your browser, you hit enter, and poof, the website just appears. It honestly feels like magic. But what is really going on in that tiny fraction of a second? Well, today we're going to pull back that curtain on the incredible, invisible system that makes the entire internet work.
No, really, think about it for a second. It feels totally instant, right? But behind the scenes, your computer is kicking off this lightning-fast global scavenger hunt. It's a surprisingly complex journey that happens so fast, we just take it completely for granted.
And this right here, this slide just nails the core problem. We humans, we remember names, right? Like nytimes.com. Easy. But the internet, this giant network of machines, it only understands numbers. These long strings of digits like 151.101.130.164. They're basically speaking two completely different languages. So how in the world do we translate between the two?
And that translation? Well, that's the whole ballgame. Every single device hooked up to the internet, your phone, your laptop, the massive servers that host websites, each one has a unique numerical address. You can think of it like a street address for a house. Without that specific address, your computer has absolutely no idea where to send its request or where to get information from.
So how did the internet's pioneers solve this huge translation problem? Well, they built something that was actually kind of brilliant in its simplicity, a global system designed for one single purpose, to be the internet's universal phone book.
And here it is, the Domain Name System, or DNS for short. And honestly, the phone book of the internet is the perfect way to think about it. You don't memorize your friend's 10-digit phone number, do you? No, you just look up their name in your contacts. DNS does the exact same thing, but for literally every website on the planet. It saves us from having to remember these impossible strings of numbers.
Okay, so we've established there's a phone book, but how does your computer actually use it? Let's follow the journey of one single request, from the moment you hit enter to the instant that correct IP address is found. It's quite a trip.
Now, this isn't just a simple one-and-done lookup. Oh no, it's actually more like a coordinated dance between 4 different types of servers, and each one plays a super important role. So let's meet the team that makes all of this happen.
I really love this library analogy because it makes so much sense. Okay, so think of it this way. Your computer first asks the librarian, that's the DNS recursor, to find a website for it. The librarian starts at the library's main index, that's the root server, which doesn't have the final answer, but it points to the right general area. From there, it finds the correct aisle, like the .com section. That's the TLD server. And finally, it grabs a specific dictionary off the shelf. That's the authoritative server, which has the one definitive answer, the exact IP address. The librarian then hustles back to your computer with that number, and the search is done.
So we know who is involved in this whole search party. But how do these servers actually communicate? It turns out they have a few different ways they can ask each other for information.
Okay, let's break this down. A recursive query is basically you telling the librarian, find this book for me and do not come back until you have it or you know for sure it doesn't exist. The librarian does all the legwork. An iterative query is more like the librarian saying, I don't know, but the answer is definitely in the .com aisle. Why don't you go look over there? See, each server just gives you the next best step. And finally, a non-recursive query is the simplest of all. It's just asking a server for an answer it already knows because it looked it up recently.
Now, this whole journey with the librarians and the indexes and all these different types of questions, it really sounds like it should take a while, doesn't it? But we know it doesn't. So what's the secret? What's the magic trick that makes this whole system feel so incredibly fast?
I mean, this is the million-dollar question, right? If your computer might have to hop across the entire globe, talking to multiple servers just to find one number, how on earth are websites loading in less than a second? Well, the answer is a really, really clever system of shortcuts. And the secret is something called DNS caching. Caching is really just a fancy word for remembering. Instead of going through that whole multi-step library search every single time you visit a website, the system is smart. It temporarily stores, or caches, the answer in a location that's much, much closer to you. It is the ultimate time saver. And check this out, it's not just one cache. There are multiple layers of these shortcuts. Your computer first checks the absolute closest place, your web browser's own memory. If the answer isn't there, it checks the next layer out, your computer's operating system. Still no luck? Okay, then it checks with your internet service provider, which keeps a cache for you and all your neighbors. Each layer is a shortcut designed to get you the answer without having to make that long trip all over again.
So we've gone through the mechanics, the nitty-gritty of how this all works.
But let's pull back for a second and look at the big picture. Why does this complex, totally invisible system matter so much in our everyday lives?
I like to think of DNS like an iceberg. All the stuff we see and do online, the shopping, the streaming, social media, all of it, that's just the tip. DNS is the massive, invisible foundation under the water that supports everything else. It is the silent hero that makes the internet work for people. Without it, the web as we know it, it just wouldn't exist, period. And this quote from our source material really just says it all, doesn't it? Seriously, can you imagine having to memorize a dozen different number sequences just to check your email or watch a video? It would be a nightmare. DNS is what saves us from that. It's the ultimate convenience, operating billions and billions of times a day, completely in the background.
And that brings us to one last and really crucial thought. This giant global phone book is constantly being updated. Websites move, new ones are created, old ones disappear. So what happens if someone writes the wrong number in it by accident? Or worse, what if a bad actor maliciously changes an entry to send you to a dangerous website instead of the one you wanted? Well, that's a whole other story, and it gets right to the heart of just how critical and fragile this invisible system truly is.